Rhiannon is a quiet and gentle young woman who seems innocent and avoids trouble, but hides a deep desire to eliminate those who bother her. She keeps a list of targets with the names of people she hates and wishes to erase from her life, such as the cashier at the supermarket who ruins her day and office colleagues who treat her with total disrespect. The list also includes her own sister Saren, who ignores her messages, and her mother, who abandoned her in childhood. The greatest resentment, however, is reserved for Julia, the colleague who bullied and mocked her throughout her school days at the hospital. Accompanying her father during treatment, his condition suddenly worsens. Rhiannon runs through the corridors, begging for help, but finds the nurse distracted in an argument, ignoring her pleas. When she returns to the room, her father couldn't resist and has already passed. With a broken heart, she leaves the clinic and breaks down inside the car, dominated by rage and wishing the entire world would simply disappear. During the funeral, Saren sits at her side without saying a single word. While greeting guests, Rhiannon freezes when she sees Julia arriving with her friends. In panic, she moves away before being noticed. After the ceremony, Saren warns that they'll need to sell father's house. Disoriented, Rhiannon doesn't remind her sister that she still lives there, but Saren reveals that Julia will be the real estate agent responsible for the sale of the property. Without leaving room for discussion, her sister cuts off the conversation and leaves, leaving her alone. On the bus, she opens Julia's profile on social media and scrolls through the feed, observing photos of a perfect and successful life, which contrasts with the destroyed self-esteem she caused in her childhood. 10 days later, she returns to her position as receptionist at a local newspaper, but realizes that no one in the office even noticed her absence or offered condolences for her father's death, feeling invisible. Fury grows inside her. The breaking point happens when her boss Norman enters the newsroom and throws his coat over her, ordering her to hang it. Even so, Rhiannon swallows her pride and gathers courage to tell him that she wants to apply for an open reporter position. After a quick look at the resume, the boss dismisses her on the spot, saying she's weak and doesn't have the profile for the job. He returns the papers and tells her to throw them away herself. Dominated by rage, she returns to her desk and starts shredding the papers with a craft knife. At that moment, a young candidate named IJ arrives for a meeting with Norman. Through the window, Rhiannon watches the boss smile and treat the young man with respect. Hatred boils inside her, and the situation gets worse. When Norman leaves the office announcing IJ as the new official reporter for the team, about to explode, she follows the newly hired man outside, fantasizing about eliminating him to take the position. She puts her hand in her pocket to grab the craft knife, but the hurry makes her cut her own hand. The tool slips and hits the ground with a bang, drawing IJ's attention, who finds her standing right behind him. She changes her posture and lies, handing a paper to the guy and warning that she only followed him to deliver the admission form. Sensing attention, he asks if she got his job. Rhiannon forces a smile and denies it, hoping only that he moves away so she can pick up the craft knife from the ground without raising suspicion. Later, walking through the street with her dog, a car window opens and someone throws a dirty diaper at her, adding another flame to her fury. Moments later, she comes across a giant billboard of Julia, a real estate advertisement stamping a perfect life. Rage rises to her head, and without realizing it, she grabs her own hair and tears out tufts by the root. When she turns around, she finds her dog lying dead on the asphalt, hit by a speeding driver who didn't even bother to stop. With a shattered heart, she faces the advertisement full of pain. After burying the animal in the garden, she leaves a trembling voice message for Saren, saying she's completely alone. She begs her sister not to sell her father's house and forbids her from using Julia's services, determined not to let her rival ruin what's left of her life. In an act of desperation, Rhiannon goes to the nightclub, where the real estate agent is celebrating with her friends. She confronts her face to face, demanding that she back out of her family, but the answer comes laden with indifference. Julia says the sale was a request from Saren and makes it clear that she doesn't care one bit about her. Mocking the situation, She pushes her aside, and the touch triggers a memory from school. Remembering the day, Julia ripped off her wig in front of everyone, responding to the habit Rhiannon had of pulling out her own hair when she suffered from bullying. In the nightclub, she moves away and ends up sitting alone by the edge of a dark lake, trying to clear her mind. The silence is broken when a guy named Ryan approaches and casually starts urinating right next to her. Disgusted, she draws his attention only to hear mockery that he hadn't even noticed her there. His words fuel her fury, and she pushes him out of pure frustration. The attitude provokes the guy, who advances as if he were going to attack her. In a violent flash, Rhiannon pulls out her blade and uses it against his stomach, repeatedly unloading all the repressed rage physically. When the guy gives up, she drags his body into the lake and pushes him to the bottom, hoping he disappears forever. Back at the house, she faces the bathroom mirror, trembling before letting out a scream. The next morning, Rhiannon wakes up, disoriented, and finds dried blood on her neck. She panics, since her mind has almost completely erased the memory of the previous night. Terrified, she throws her dirty clothes in the washing machine and sits on the floor, trembling. Fear increases when the doorbell rings. She opens the door and finds Craig, one of her father's old work colleagues, who delivers an envelope with documents and bank transfers, showing interest in buying the family workshop. She just takes the paperwork and closes the door in silence. Later, on the bus heading to work, the route passes by the same lake from the previous night. Her heart almost stops when she sees police rescuing the body from the water. She arrives at the office, looking nervous around. Moments later, Norman gathers the team in search of breaking news. It's the cue for reporter Jeff to enter, announcing the discovery of Ryan in the lake. The boss loves the idea for the newspaper cover. Rhiannon makes a risky decision not to be ignored and says it wasn't a drowning, but a fatal attack with a sharp weapon. To justify the information, she lies, saying she overheard passengers gossiping on public transport. Norman embraces the theory and sends Jake to the crime scene, irritating Rhiannon by being left out yet again. Soon after, IJ and Jeff return with the official update. The experts confirmed 14 blade wounds on the victim. Rhiannon freezes, terrified by the possibility that detectives have found some trace of her. She relaxes when she hears that the police found no clues or evidence that leads to the culprit. Spying on Jeff's notebook, Rhiannon notices strange scribbles she can't understand. Suddenly, IJ appears nervous. He comments that the reporter seems to be hiding information. The colleague responds that he's sure the person responsible will be caught soon, and she tries to hide the tension, arguing that half of last year's crimes still haven't been solved. Later, at her desk, Jeff calls looking for Norman with new information about Ryan. Rhiannon lies, saying the boss is busy, but asked her to receive the updates instead. She enters his office and lies again, claiming she discovered the victim's full name, Ryan Lloyd, who lived with his mother. Norman is surprised by the agility, since Jeff was in charge of the case. Cornered, she invents that the reporter's car tires blew out and warns that someone needs to get to Ryan's house immediately before another newspaper scoops the story. To convince him to let her go, she uses the argument that the grieving mother would feel more comfortable speaking with a woman. On the way to the residence, she gets frustrated that IJ is right by her side. He apologizes, explaining that Norman insisted on his company. Rhiannon almost explodes with rage, but justifies the attitude with the recent loss of her father. IJ opens up in return by sharing that when he lost his grandmother, he became aggressive for months, even kicking a wall so hard he broke a finger. When they arrive, Ryan's mother answers the door and becomes uncomfortable when she learns they're from the press. With empathy, IJ convinces her to let them in. While the woman talks in tears about her son, she promises that if she finds who did it, she'll make the culprit pay with their own skin. Rhiannon freezes when she discovers that Ryan had a recent and aggressive confrontation with an old work colleague named Dave. She takes advantage of the distraction, asks permission to use the bathroom, but sneakily enters the victim's bedroom. There she finds and steals documents that prove her involvement with Ryan. With the paperwork hidden, she leaves the house holding her breath until she passes through the front door. Back in the car, she shows the files to IJ, warning that they need to find Dave immediately. The justification for the firing was misconduct, which for Rhiannon reinforces the idea that the guy was the type of person who deserved the end he had. IJ becomes disturbed by the coldness of the comment, and realizing she went too far, she changes her tone, pretending she just wants a strong story to impress Norman and beat the senior reporter. The two find Dave, who is stunned by the news. After they reassure him that he's not a suspect, the man explains that Ryan was unstable, that he bothered him constantly, and spread serious lies about him in the work environment. The false accusations caused so many problems that the company decided to fire him. Later in the car, Rhiannon's phone vibrates with a message from Saren. She warns that Julia found a buyer for the house, and that they're on their way to the property at that exact moment. So she begs for her to get home quickly. As soon as she gets inside, she runs to the bathroom and cleans the bathtub where her stained clothes were. She grabs the blade she had thrown in a vase and hides it seconds before Julia enters with the client. They inspect each room while Rhiannon stands there, seething with rage. As soon as they leave, she returns to the newsroom to report everything to the boss. Jeff is furious at having the story stolen right under his nose, and Norman decides that the two should publish the piece together. Although the reporter hates the idea, Rhiannon couldn't be more satisfied with the plan working perfectly. The day gets even better when Norman invites her to join the team at a bar to celebrate the success. Later, among colleagues, she finally feels she belongs somewhere. She even gets on stage to sing, enjoying the feeling, but the illusion shatters when police enter the establishment. Rhiannon freezes again, while the police block the exit to interrogate everyone present, and she's absolutely certain of the reason. She runs to the bar bathroom, terrified by the possibility that the police are there because of her. Inside, she finds graffiti on the wall, with Ryan's name accompanied by an insult, which is enough to confirm that he had many other enemies. At that moment, Official Marina enters the bathroom and, in panic, Rhiannon escapes before the officer notices anything suspicious. Outside, she observes a bartender arguing with a man named Mike and recognizes him. He's the same guy who was yelling at the nurse on the night her father died, the distraction that prevented her from getting help in time. Rage resurges, and she decides he deserves an end. She follows him and calls him, pretending to need help with a lost cat. The moment he turns around, she advances and uses her blade against him repeatedly. This time, the feeling is pure satisfaction and relief. The attitude feels to her like an act of justice. As she moves away from the place, she comes across another billboard with Julia's smiling face and stares at it with hatred, deciding that the real estate agent will be next. In the morning, Rhiannon begins to stalk her, mentally listing all the reasons why she deserves to end. The friends, the successful job, the comfortable house, and even a boyfriend, while her own life amounts to being ignored and seeing her family home about to be sold. Focused on the plan, she empties her own freezer and gets inside it to test if the space is big enough to hide a body. Later, Craig calls her, apologizing for the delay in contacting her after their first meeting at the front door. Genuinely interested in him and fantasizing about the future together, she immediately accepts his invitation to go out. That same night, later, at the supermarket to buy cleaning supplies, the cashier completely ignores her, laughing on the phone with a friend and calling her weird right to her face. Humiliated, Rhiannon grabs the girl's phone and plunges it straight into a glass of juice before walking away. Back at home, she calls Julia and invites her to inspect the newly cleaned property, hoping to attract her. During the night, since the real estate agent is busy and suggests the next day, Rhiannon sends a message to Craig confirming the meeting at 8 p.m. In the newsroom, she arrives with coffee and pastries for everyone, trying to fit in. But her mood drops when she sees the article about Ryan, printed on the front page, only with Jeff's name in the credits. She confronts him, reminding him that Norman had ordered shared authorship. Mocking her, he claims that he wrote the real story himself and calls her useless, leaving the coffee cup on the table as he walks away. Discreetly, Rhiannon pours a strong laxative into his drink. When Jeff returns, drinks the coffee, and leaves without noticing anything. The atmosphere in the office changes when Ryan's mother invades the place. Furious with the article that exposed her son's lies about Dave, she yells that the text will destroy the guy's reputation and make everyone hate him. Without showing empathy, Rhiannon retorts that Ryan wasn't a good person and deserved the end he had, leaving the entire office in silence. Moments later, the laxative takes effect and Jeff rushes to the bathroom with severe cramps, staying trapped there for the rest of the day. With no options, Norman sends the reporter home and assigns Rhiannon to cover his duties temporarily. Later, she gets ready for the meeting, changing her makeup and clothes. IJ notices the transformation and compliments her, asking if she's going to meet a boyfriend. She denies it, making up that she's going to take care of pending matters at her father's workshop. That night, Rhiannon waits for Craig at the restaurant, nervous about him being late. However, when he finally appears, the atmosphere flows and becomes romantic. The two go to his house, and she spends the night there. The next morning, she wakes up excited about the perfect night, but the feeling of peace doesn't last long. The phone rings with a call from official Marina, summoning her to the police station to give a statement about Ryan's death. At the police station, Rhiannon sits with official Marina and lead investigator Roy. The detectives reassure her, saying that it's not an official interrogation, just a collection of accounts from those who were in the lake area. She uses mourning as a shield, responding that she lost her father and her dog on that same day and insists that she didn't witness anything unusual. When she returns to the newsroom, she discovers that police found Mike's body attacked with exactly the same pattern, increasing her fear. After work, she goes to Craig's workshop, but is caught off guard by Julia's presence at the location. The real estate agent warns that she won't sell her family's house to the client anymore, as she decided to buy it for herself. Rhiannon leaves furious, but not before secretly stealing Julia's phone. Locked in the car, she lets out a scream of rage. Then she gets out of the vehicle, pulls out her blade, and punctures Julia's car tire. Backing into the shadows, she waits at a distance. As soon as Craig walks away, Rhiannon approaches the real estate agent with a fake smile of concern, offering a ride given the unexpected situation. Julia asks her only to call a ride app, but Rhiannon uses the news to her advantage, reminding her that someone dangerous is loose in the area. Scared, Julia agrees and gets in the vehicle. She realizes they're heading toward Rhiannon's father's old house and not a safe place. Making an excuse, Rhiannon says she found a suspicious stain in the basement and demands that the real estate agent inspect the defect before closing the purchase. Julia hesitates, but follows her down to the lower level. Far from any witnesses, Rhiannon confesses to being responsible for the attacks the police are investigating and says that cruel people like Julia deserve an end, blaming her for destroying her self-esteem and for trying to ruin what's left of her life now. In panic, Julia tries to run, but is grabbed. The two fall to the ground in a struggle, and Rhiannon grabs a heavy object, hitting the real estate agent's head hard. When Julia regains consciousness, she realizes she's immobilized and tied up in the basement. Terrified, she accuses Rhiannon of being insane, and she, furious, yells back, claiming that years of bullying and exclusion pushed her to that limit. She recalls how the trauma made her pull out her own hair until she needed to wear wigs. Instead of showing any remorse, Julia counters that she's not a victim, but a dangerous criminal looking for justifications for her actions. Rhiannon covers her mouth again and, unsure what to do, abandons the prisoner in the basement. Upstairs, she cries over her father's old bathrobe. The next morning, she returns to Craig's workshop to probe the relationship between him and Julia. He denies any involvement, arguing that he assumed she already knew about his interest in buying the house. Taking advantage of a moment of his distraction, Rhiannon discreetly takes the USB drive with the security camera footage, ensuring that police never discover that she punctured the tire and that Julia got into her car the previous night. On the bus, She records a firm voice message to Saren, demanding that any decision about the property goes through her first. During the trip, a guy sits too close, pressing his body against hers. Instead of backing away, she puts her hand on his leg and asks if that makes him uncomfortable. The man panics and stands up immediately while Rhiannon smiles, proud that she's no longer the only one being oppressed. In the newsroom, she invades Norman's office and warns that she has a new scoop, but demands an immediate promotion to junior reporter in exchange. Norman agrees, but offers only the intern position under supervision. Accepting the terms, Rhiannon reveals that a local girl has gone missing and raises the theory that she might have been a victim of the same attacker the police are looking for. The boss questions the source of the tip, but she refuses to reveal it, citing source confidentiality. Impressed, he puts her in charge of the story. IJ congratulates her, showing genuine pride that makes it clear he cares about her. Savoring the moment, she feels that for the first time, the pieces are falling into place. IJ takes the opportunity to share details about Mike's history. The second victim, he was a greedy landlord who exploited immigrants in poor apartments and recently evicted a single mother onto the streets. So she feels she did justice. Again, IJ suggests they go out together after work, and she accepts the invitation enthusiastically. Later, Rhiannon starts stalking Julia's friends on the internet and reaches out to Lucille, pretending concern for the real estate agent because she's not answering her phone. Lucille sends her own number and begs her to call, terrified that Julia has been missing since the previous night. Rhiannon pretends surprise and concern, although deep down she's savoring the fact that everyone believes Julia has simply disappeared. She meets with her friends and promises to do whatever it takes to help with the search, maintaining her act. Meanwhile, official Marina reviews the security camera images from the nightclub and notices the heated discussion between Julia and Rhiannon, as well as catching the young woman leaving furiously. The system records prove that she lied in her statement about the time she was at the location. The officer tries to contact the real estate agent for interrogation, but the assistant informs her that she hasn't shown up for work. Without knowing she's under suspicion, Rhiannon goes to Julia's boyfriend Marcos's house. Using her position at the newspaper as a cover, she claims to be writing a story about the disappearance and promises to help. Marcos opens up, visibly frightened and shaken. He says he hasn't gone a single day without news from his girlfriend and is convinced that she was kidnapped, revealing he's already contacted the police this morning. Rhiannon pretends to comfort him, and probing the guy, she asks about recent fights between the couple, but he insists that the two were perfectly happy. She then asks for a photo where Julia looks sad to illustrate the article. Taking advantage of Marcos leaving the room to find the image, she steals one of Julia's shirts. As a final touch, she deliberately spills coffee on the couch, staining the upholstery, and returns to sit with an innocent posture when he returns with the photograph. In the office, Rhiannon vibrates with excitement about the first article published under her name, feeling like she's finally seen and respected. IJ also shows pride in her achievements. The festive atmosphere is broken by a desperate call from Saren. She warns that Julia has disappeared and that the house buyer, Bill, is already at the property door with the key to take final measurements. Rhiannon's heart races and she runs to the residence. When she sees the buyer at the door, she snatches the key from his hand and yells that the house is no longer for sale. Scared by the attack, Bill backs away and leaves without arguing. The night before getting ready for her outing with IJ, she chooses Julia's stolen shirt, trying to absorb her confidence. However, she hears screams for help coming from the basement. Rhiannon goes downstairs and warns that no one will show up, since her article convinced everyone that the real estate agent disappeared without a trace. Julia counters that Marcos and her friends won't give up, but stops when she notices her own shirt on her body. Julia mocks Rhiannon's appearance, triggering a new wave of rage in her. Later at the bar she meets IJ, but Craig shows up and joins the table. Without wasting time, he introduces himself to the reporter and demands that he leaves so he can be alone with Rhiannon. Hurt and uncomfortable with the situation, he leaves. Rhiannon tries to follow him, but he's already gone. On the way home, she finds Marcos drunk on the street. She helps him into his house and, taking advantage of a distraction, steals his phone. What she discovers leaves her in shock. When she returns home, she goes down to the basement, holding her blade, and confronts Julia, accusing her of being a fraud with a fake perfect life. Rhiannon reads her messages with Marcos out loud, exposing a toxic relationship full of fights and manipulation. She accuses him of ruining the guy's life the same way she did to her years ago, breaking Julia's posture. Julia breaks down and sobs, admitting that Marcos is abusive and controlling, and that he's the real culprit for destroying everything. Rhiannon becomes confused, but isn't fully convinced. Meanwhile, at the police station, official Marina read Rhiannon's article about the real estate agent's disappearance and becomes even more suspicious. The next morning, she meets with her boss and pieces together the puzzle. She details the connections. Julia, an old school classmate of Ryan's, disappeared, and Rhiannon published the case in the media before Marcos even contacted the police. She fought with the real estate agent at the nightclub and left at the exact moment Ryan was attacked. And Mike met his end on the same night the journalist was at the bar where he was last seen. Everything points to the fact that all the victims are connected to Rhiannon. Marina theorizes that, due to the young woman's history of invisibility, she may be eliminating people just to get attention. Her boss instructs her to interrogate Marcos. Meanwhile, in the basement, Rhiannon eats with Julia, who claims that Marcos won't stop looking for her, but she counters that he won't have time because her life will come to an end before that. Suddenly, the doorbell rings with extreme nervousness. Rhiannon threatens Julia, warning that if she makes any noise, the person at the door will suffer the consequences, and so will she. Opening the door, she's surprised to find IJ, who explains that Norman asked him to check on her for not answering the phone. She makes up that she sent a message saying she was sick and wouldn't go to work. Rhiannon asks him to tell the boss she'll be back the next day and thanks him for his concern, but he responds coldly, reinforcing that he only came because the boss asked him to. At that moment, a noise comes from inside the house, and IJ assumes Craig is there with her. So upset, he leaves. Rhiannon goes down to the basement and finds a broken plate on the ground. Julia quickly says the object fell on its own, but suddenly she attacks her, cutting her with scissors she managed to grab. Julia throws the glass shards, and the two enter a violent physical struggle. To defend herself, Rhiannon grabs a broom handle and hits her hard. After the confusion, she puts Julia in the bathtub to help her regain consciousness. Disoriented, she mutters that the action reminded her of Marcos, revealing that his last assault involved hitting her head against a glass door. Furious at the comparison, Rhiannon denies being like him, arguing that she's only eliminating cruel people. Taking advantage of the moment, she questions why so much hatred back at school. Julia finally confesses that she hated herself and projected it onto Rhiannon. She felt envious of the love the girl received from her father, and hurting her brought a sickly relief to her own pain. With tears in her eyes, she apologizes for the past. At that moment, a message from Craig warns that the police raided the workshop because Julia's car was found parked there before the disappearance. At the search location, Marina interrogates the employees and notices the security cameras installed. When searching the office, she discovers that the USB drive with the images is missing, quickly concluding that someone erased the traces intentionally. At night, watching Rhiannon getting ready for her outing with Craig, Julia offers to help with her makeup. Holding the eyeliner, Julia considers using the tip against her to try to escape, but her courage fails and she backs down. Arriving at Craig's house, Rhiannon is surprised by the dinner he prepared. During the conversation, she asks him not to mention that she was there with him and Julia on the night of the disappearance. She lies, making up that she needed to film an event at that time and skipped with the boss. To avoid being fired, she begs Craig to sustain her alibi, and he agrees without suspecting. The next day, Norman assigns Rhiannon to write a detailed profile about Julia with IJ's help. The excitement disappears when she discovers that Jeff talked to Marcos about her. Later, during a task force organized by Julia's friends, she notices Jeff and Marcos talking and looking in her direction, putting her on alert. At that moment, official Marina appears investigating the relationship between the two. The officer discovers from the friends that Rhiannon was never part of the group and was the constant target of bullying from them at school. With suspicions increasing, Marina approaches and throws bait, praising her supposed kindness and forgiving the trauma of the past to help with the search. IJ becomes confused, since Rhiannon never mentioned knowing the victim, leaving her extremely tense. Suddenly, Marcos, furious, confronts her publicly. He reveals that he knows she stole his shirt and threatens to destroy her career. IJ tries to intervene to protect her, but the pressure makes Rhiannon explode. She pushes her colleague away harshly, accusing him of being obsessed with her. Seething with hatred, she follows Marcos, pulling the blade from her pocket to eliminate him. The plan is ruined when Jeff sees her armed. Shocked, the reporter flees, and she chases him through the streets. During the chase, Jeff crosses the avenue without looking and is hit violently by a bus, losing his life instantly. Shaken by the chaos, she flees to the lake shore, ready to throw the blade in the water to get rid of the evidence. However, the phone vibrates with a threatening message from Marcos. The provocation makes her change her mind. She puts the weapon back in her pocket. Returning to the basement, she proposes an agreement to Julia, forgiveness in exchange for help to incriminate Marcos. Taking advantage of his history of assault, she suggests that Julia accuse him of the attacks and her own kidnapping. Hesitant, Julia agrees. The plan is to tie her in another place, lure the guy, force him to touch the blade, and call the police for the catch. After a severe warning not to try any tricks, Rhiannon removes Julia from the captivity and takes her to an empty property owned by Marcos, equipped with a security system. Inside, she ties Julia again, leaves the knife nearby, and deliberately sets off the alarm. When Marcos arrives to check the break-in, he's shocked to see his girlfriend tied up. Suspicious, he accuses her of betrayal and partnering with the kidnapper. Driven by sickly jealousy, he advances and starts to suffocate her. At that moment, Rhiannon appears and orders him to stop, warning that the police are already on the way. Marcos breaks down in tears and, afraid of being abandoned, he threatens to jump down the stairs. Realizing that Julia is about to give in and go back to his side, Rhiannon resolves the situation with her own hands. So she pushes him. At the moment the siren sounds, she reinforces the warning to Julia not to deviate from the planned story. Official Marina enters with the agents with a look full of suspicion. Later, at the police station, Rhiannon faces the investigator head-on, fantasizing about eliminating her to get rid of the last threat to her plan. During the interrogation, Marina pressures her, stating that there's no logical explanation for her being at the property at that instant. Without hesitation, she lies, saying she found the address by chance at Marcos's house and followed her instincts when suspecting the captivity. To close the narrative perfectly, she pins all the blame for recent events on the dead man. She reports that before jumping down the stairs, Marcos threatened to end both of them, confessing to have done the same to Ryan and Mike. When the officer shows the photo of the seized blade, Rhiannon confirms that the weapon belonged to the guy. Marina pressures her, pointing out that the seized weapon is a woodworking tool, the same trade her late father did. The officer accuses her of having kept the object out of attachment and of having lost control when she discovered Julia would by her family's house. Cornered, Rhiannon breaks down and denies the accusations. After that, Julia's interrogation confirms the alibi. She repeats the planned story, and, when confronted with the photo of the blade, maintains the lie that it belonged to Marcos. Without support, Marina argues with superiors, who consider the young woman too harmless and refuse to pursue the theory further. Released for lack of evidence, Rhiannon returns home and finds Julia at the door, desperate to escape the reporters, trying to restart and have a friendship. They go out together at night. Since Julia's accounts have been blocked by her ex-boyfriend, she borrows Rhiannon's card. While Rhiannon celebrates dancing at the bar, Marina sneaks into her house searching for answers. Rummaging through the drawers, she finds the stolen USB drive from the workshop. When she plugs the device in, she sees the clear images of the young woman puncturing the car tire, finding the perfect evidence. The next day, enjoying the company on the rooftop, Rhiannon suggests that Julia move permanently to her sister's old room. At that moment, the phone vibrates with a message from IJ, confessing that he's in love with her, which leaves her over the moon. However, the smile disappears when she enters the room and comes face to face with Marina. The investigator displays the USB drive, guaranteeing that now she has concrete evidence. Maintaining her coldness, Rhiannon faces her without showing an ounce of fear. She then takes her new friend to the newsroom, where everyone treats her as a hero for having saved the real estate agent. During the team meeting, Julia starts feeling uncomfortable with the pressure and decides to leave, warning that she'll stop by her own house only to grab a few things. Later, Rhiannon stops by Craig's workshop. He takes the moment and forces her to sign the sale contract for the place, using as blackmail the secret that she was there with him and Julia on the night of the disappearance. Afraid of the police, she gives in. After, she ignores the incessant calls from Saren. Suddenly, the doorbell rings and she finds IJ. Emotional, she confirms that she ended everything with Craig, making it clear that her feelings for him are reciprocal. The next morning, Rhiannon tries to contact Julia, who hasn't been in touch since the previous day. She leaves a voice message demanding the return of the card, since the bank notified a huge withdrawal of money. When she returns to bed, IJ tells her that a police friend leaked the photo of the seized blade. When he sees the image, he recognizes the tool she used to cut papers at the newsroom. Putting the pieces together, he realizes she's the true responsible for everything. Rhiannon tries to calm him and deceive him, but he searches the house for the tool, and when he doesn't find it, his suspicions are confirmed. With no way out, she breaks down and confesses her actions, justifying that she did bad things, but that she was changing because of him. Horrified, IJ calls her a monster. In tears, she begs him to stay by her side, but he pushes her, trying to escape. At that moment, Rhiannon grabs a knife and advances against him, attacking him repeatedly while screaming that she's not a monster. Suddenly, the front door opens, everyone freezing in shock.